This instructional video is how to convert a Windows 7 64-bit MBR boot disk to a GPT disk using PartedMagic, which is a Linux distribution. Now you may ask, why do we want to do this? Well, GPT is poised to become the standard for the hard disk partitioning because of the size limitations of the MBR. It will be the mainstream standard in the near future. Compared with MBR disk, GPT provides greater reliability because of replication and cyclical redundancy check protection of the partition table. At the end of the GPT disk, it also keeps a backup of the partition table as well. What you see here is a normal typical layout of what a GPT disk install looks like under PartedMagic. Now this is what is the end result of the operating system taking charge of an uninitialized disk, and it's set up 100 megabyte FAT32 header for the UEFI, which is the minimum size. Typically we use the 200 megabyte because if your drive's larger you're going to need that, and it actually should be either 100 megabyte minimum or 1% of the disk size, whichever is greater. So typically I'll use 200, and that's usually plenty. Secondly, it created the Microsoft reserved partition, and this is really only needed for conversion from a basic disk to dynamic disks in Windows. Some other programs might need to have access to this, but very unlikely that you'll run into that. However, PartedMagic is unable to create this partition, so unless you really want to have that reserve partition, you'll have to use the second method, which is a little bit more involved, because what you would have to do is install the operating system like you see here, then take your backup of your existing operating system that you've got all configured and ready to go, so you back that up, then you would copy just the primary partitions of that backup onto the primary partitions here. So there's some backing up. You have to have all these backups in place to do this, and then that would work as well. I've tried it and it works. So so there's two options that you can do. Okay, here we are back. Like I had said, we're going to focus on the Linux option of converting our MBR to GPT. And what you see here is my boot screen, which by pushing F8 on the my ASUS motherboard gets me into the boot screen. And I wanted to show you this because it gives you a couple of options here. You have your CD-ROMs right here. Then you have your hard drive, which is my hard drive, which is the Corsair Force GT solid state drive. And then it lists the CD-ROM again, but under UEFI. Now we could select UEFI here, but if we did that, then we would have to have our USB thumb drive set up as a GPT drive as well. And it will fine, you can do that, but it's not necessary. So we're just going to select the top one here to boot off that drive, and as soon as we boot up, it's going to give us a screen here, and to select from a couple of different options, we're going to select the 64 right here, and then we hit enter. And it's loading, and as soon as it finishes loading here, I'll come back and we'll finish with this presentation. Alright, we're back here. It's got my desktop, and I wanted just to show you what you see. You just select your time zone, whatever time zone you're in, click OK. One thing I do want to mention is that it will eject the CD automatically, and you just take the CD out and put it to the side. Also, I do want to mention to be sure that you take a look at the notes below, because there are some prerequisites and requirements that are needed for GPT. one has to do with the UEFI version of your motherboard. It needs to be 2.0 or later. There's some other specifications too as far as what type of operating systems work. Requirements. Of course, you're going to need to have a DVD, the installation DVD. It's important to have, and then of course the Linux parted magic and a thumb drive. So very important, I want to stress though here is that before you do any further, that you created a backup of your hard drive. It's very important you make a backup of that. And when you're doing so, you may want to consider defragmenting at the same time. Okay, there's a few things that you're going to want to have ahead of time before we go any further. I do want to mention that you do get the copy of your Windows boot files onto your USB thumb drive. So down below in the notes kind of gives you some instructions of where to get them, either off the installation DVD or off your installed operating system. So you're going to need to want to do that ahead of time so you're prepared before we go any further. And so get that done and get that out of the way. Okay, now that we booted into the Linux here, I've used the latest version currently, which is 2014-04-28. That's what we're going to use to convert the disk to GPT. You can get the latest version at partedmagic.com, and then just burn the image to disk and then boot it to on the CD like you just saw. Once Parted Magic boots up, you'll see this really neat desktop here. And we're going to want to follow some commands here that we're going to want to do. We're going to open the terminal window down at the bottom here, which is down at the lower left down here. It's got the little dollar sign here, so we open that window up, and it gives you a screen here. Let me zoom in a little bit so we can see what's going on. Okay, so the first thing that we do is that the pound sign is already there, so we just type in gdisk /dev/SDA and then enter, and you'll see here it gives you a message about the partition table. I don't know if it's picking up on that or not, but it says MBR only and not GPT is not present. So by the time we get done with this, it will be present. Okay, so the next commands that we're going to start doing is really just basically we're going to use the W command. We type W, enter. It says about to write to GPT data. It'll overwrite anything existing, and then you hit Y, basically for yes. Okay, writing, and it just told me that hopefully this is picking it up here on the screen. Okay, now that the partition table is GPT, which it says there that it is, it's time to create some partitions. We're going to use gparted, which is an icon up here on the desktop. Over here on the left, it's called Partition Editor. And you'll see it comes up our partitions. I got my main operating system here, and then my data for my operating system that I have on here. So I have two, and it appears I have some remnants here of some unallocated space not being used. Okay, here we are going to set up the header partition. at the beginning of the drive. Architecturally, it doesn't have to be at the beginning of the drive, but it's suggested to do so. There's some papers out there indicating the reasons why you'd want to have that done, but we won't get into that now. So we'll just get this set up by right-clicking on, because we need to resize, move this current partition. So we're going to resize it, and we just select, we're going to put the 200. We just put the arrow key here to 200. We click resize move. It's going to say moving the partition might cause some problems. You just click OK. And then you got to remember to click apply. When you're in here, the command lines do it automatically, but here you have to click apply. You click apply, and then you just say, if we do it again, confirms that's what you wanted to do. And this takes a couple of minutes to do, so we'll be back when this finishes, and then we'll continue on. Okay, as you see, the operation successfully completed. So we click close to finish that task, and we'll move on. Now that process finished, we need to format this partition, and we'll call it the header partition. So we're going to need to format it to FAT32. So we right click, we click new, we come over here to the where it says file system over here on the right, and that's the only thing we change, FAT32 here. And then for the label, I type in system. You click the add button. It adds, and remember, when we're doing it in here, nothing actually physically completes until we click apply. Click apply, and that's completed. Okay, now that that's finished, we need to change the header partition type. So we're going to go back to the command line for this. So we'll just move this out of the way, bring this forward, the terminal. That way I never did close it. It's just like, just leave it open. So I'll just bring this into the screen here. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit better. See if we can see that. Okay. So you click in the box, and just G disk. Oh, got the cap locks on. Probably doesn't matter, but space /DEV /SDA. Okay, and it tells us that it found now a valid GPT with a protective MBR, which is normal. And so it's using GPT now. So that's good. That's a good sign. That's what we want to see. So the next command that we type is T. This changes the single partition type code using a hexadecimal. So it's going to ask us for the partition number, and it says anywhere from 1 through 3. Well, if you look up in the list, when it created it, you'll see SDA 3. That's your clue, okay? So it's going to be 3. So you type in 3, enter. It tells us the current type is Microsoft Basic Data. We need to change that. So, and the code that we type in there is EF000. I put in caps. It doesn't. I don't think it really matters. Hit enter, and it just tells us change the type of partition to EFI system. Now that that's taken care of, we're going to need to enter the experts mode. So we type X, enter. And then we have to set the file attributes. So we type an A, enter. Now it's asking us for the partition number that we want to change the attribute to, anywhere from 1 to 3. And as we know, it's 3. So 3. So we want to type 0 here. It's 0 to 63 is it, then that's called that's because that's a 0 is the system boot partition. Now at this point we want to hit enter to exit. It says 0 to 60 or enter to exit, so we want to exit out, so we hit enter. Then it exits us out of that, and then now we want to write. We want to write we have to still save our commands here, so we type W, and it says final checks complete, about to write, are you sure you wish to do so, and you click Y, and operation has completed successfully. Okay, now that that's completed, we're going to need to create some folders on this partition. So we need to make some directories or folders, and we're going to use the command lines to do this. So we end up typing make mkdir, so it's make directory basically, / then we're going to mount UEFI. Capitalization here may be important, so pay attention to case sensitive commands. Okay, so that completed. And then we type, now we mount /dev, and then SDA, and the number of our partition, which was 3, space /MNT /UEFI in caps. Enter. And now what we're going to do is we're going to mount the thumb drive into the system. So you plug in, now we're going to plug into the plugging in the USB now, and what you'll see here is down at the, let me back out here, you have over here like a hard drive looking device. So click on that, and it came up here way up in the screen. I guess I have to open it, and you'll see here our USB drive set up. Okay, so I'm going to be popping these screens in and out just so we can see them clear enough. But right now you'll see that this one here is mounted, because that was the command line that we said to mount it. Now you could come in here and we could mount it this way too, but just showing you some command lines how to get this done. And so we got that. Now that the USB is mounted. Okay, yeah, we're going to we need to find out the location of the USB drive here. So you're going to take a look here, and after it says DEV /SDB1, okay, that's the name of your USB drive. So I make a note of that, because that's what we're going to do down here next, because we need to mount it. /DEV /SDB1, because that's what it was. Okay, you got to pay attention to what that was. Space /MNT /USB. Okay, so now we got that taken care of. We need to create the file structure on the header drive to where all the files are going to go. Just to show you what that last command did here, because he wasn't on the screen, it ended up mounting the USB drive. And you see there's a little triangle here saying you don't pull that USB drive out until you click the red. You'd have to unmount it over here. Okay, so that's what happened there. Okay, the next part gets a little tedious, but it has to do with making some folders on the header drive. So I know there's some quick shortcuts to do this. I just don't remember them offhand, so I'm going to do them one by one. All this is going to be in the instructions. Maybe I'll even put it up on the screen here. But you just type them all in: mkdir, mnt, UEFI, EFI, Microsoft. You just double check your spelling. Okay, and then one more, MNT. Basically you're repeating what you just did, but we're getting all the directories set up further down in the subfolders. Oops, I got a question mark there, don't I? Okay, / UEFI. Oh no, just EFI. You got to pay attention to what we're doing. And then Microsoft, and then boot. Okay. All right. Now that we got those done, we need to copy the contents of the EFI subfolder. That's the boot folder that we copied onto the USB drive earlier. Okay, the next part here is actually fairly quite simple. I'm not going to use the command lines. Makes it a little more easier for everybody. I'm just going to bring this up here where we mounted these. Let me get these other items here minimized out of the way. You'll see where it's mounted, these two reds that says unmount. Okay, these are the SDA3 is our header, and this is our USB drive. Okay, over here to the right is our folders. Okay, I'm going to double click that, and that opens up the folder. And then I come over here and I double click the USB drive. Oh, did it too many times. Got all these windows open. You'll tell here what you have open because it says USB and UEFI. So you only need to click it once. So you just go back and forth here. And the USB folder, you just highlight the EFI because that's my EFI folder that I need. And I right click, I go copy, then I come over to the tab and where it says UEFI, and even up here you'll see that make sure you're in the right directory. That's the UEFI. And if I come in here, you see it looks like it's already there because we created the folder. So you just have to go down to the subdirectories, and in the boot directory you double click one more time, and then you go paste in the boot directory. So as you see, this is where you'll be: UEFI, EFI, Microsoft boot, and then that's where you copy the EFI folder. I know at the beginning it looks a little confusing because here it said EFI, I understand, but that's just what the name of the mounted folder is. So now that's done, that's taken care of, we got that copied over. We just close these windows, that one there. Now you need to unmount these before we close anything. You just unmount, it comes back up, unmount, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, just remember to remove your thumb drive. Okay, now that you've removed your USB drive, insert your Windows operating system disk into the CD drive, into your or DVD player, whichever you have, and we're going to reboot. So we log out, and I've got the DVD in, and I'm going to restart the computer, and we'll be back once it restarts. Okay, upon rebooting, you want to be sure to get into your menu screen. You want to go down and push your F8. On my Asus board it was F8, And now we want to select the UEFI. We want to be sure that we select UEFI now, because we're going to boot UEFI through the DVD on the Windows disk. Okay. So it's going to say push any key to boot from the. Okay. Now this is what you should see. This is a good sign. It says Windows Setup EMS enabled. So you just hit enter here at this point, and you'll notice it has an F8. If you were to hit F8, that takes you to like a safe mode. But we just hit enter to continue. Windows is loading files, and we'll be back after that gets done loading. Okay, once Windows starts up, it'll get you take you to the language screen. You click next. And at this point, you have two options to select repair your computer, or we can do the line command, which I'll show you how we get that done. Okay, I've found that if you hit the Shift F10 at this screen, will bring up a command line rather than selecting the repair your computer, which seems to work a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, and more success. So we hit Shift F10 here, and we get this sources screen. If you can make that out. And what we do here is we'll type in BCD boot, and then the drive letter of your Windows installation, which should be C drive. Matter of fact, what we do is just go C drive and directory, and there you'll see the my Windows directory. At the X sources, BCD boot C drive / Windows space / V, and then enter. Now you'll see, if you did it correctly, it'll say boot files successfully created, and then at this point you just type WPEUTIL reboot, and we'll reboot. Okay, when you reboot, don't let it go through the process. You want to push your menu screen. You want to get to the menu. So on my board it was the F8. So you want to bring up the menu screen, and you should see, if we can make it out here, it says Windows Boot Manager now is listed, where previously before that was not listed. So we'll go ahead and select Windows Boot Manager, and we'll see what happens. And there you go. Just checking the file system just for consistency, integrity, and then we'll let this finish, and then we'll come back and see if we get my start menu. Okay, it finished through the check disk menu, and I'm getting my screen for booting up. You're welcome. And you'll see my desktop here, which this is my system preparation tool, which I was preparing this for a rollout for 10 machines. So I'm setting this up for 10 different machines, which is a SysPrep WAIK setup that's done in a networking environment. So I'm getting this set up for them. And so anyway, I just cancel. This was just an image I had that I was using as a test image. So that's it. That's the end of the tutorial. One thing I do want to mention is at the boot screen, which I'll show you here. Okay, on the boot screen, I'm pushing delete to get into my BIOS, the UEFI BIOS. I wanted to show you the boot menu. You go over to boot. This is the ASUS UEFI BIOS utility setup. You will notice if you come down boot option 1, let me zoom in a little bit here. It put the Windows boot manager selected there as boot option 1. Normally I usually have my boot option 1 set to my CD drive, but however, when you have this Windows boot manager in there, if you do that, if I selected this, the ATPI, the ATAPI, CD, and then the Windows boot manager second, it won't boot. It likes to be boot set at the first option. What'll happen is you'll get if I do set it like this and I save it, it's no harm, really any harm. What happens is that you just get a message, which you'll see here in a second. Okay, reboot and select proper boot device. Okay, and press any key. You're like, what the heck? What happened? So if you see that menu, it's because maybe UEFI didn't set the proper order of booting for you. Okay, so you'll have to go into your BIOS and make sure the boot manager is listed first. Okay, so here on out, that's another one of those caveats here of the boot managers. It likes to be listed first, and your CD-ROM would have to be listed second. So that's if you have any